Morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Princeton, where in our open and welcoming community, we live our message of hope, love, justice, and joy. We extend a special welcome to our visitors. We're really happy that you've joined us. And if you haven't already stopped by the newcomer table, please do so after the worship service. We can add you to our e-list and let you know about the many different events that we have coming up here at UU Princeton. Again, welcome everyone to worship this morning. We have a few announcements. The first is that our fellowship auction is coming up soon, and we need your donations for that. Our team of volunteers who lead that wonderful offering have many suggestions for donations, so please reach out to them through the church office or reply to their emails or phone calls so that we can make their efforts more rewarding. The online auction takes place from February 21st to February 28th. And then the in-person celebration party with more opportunities to bid on the items will take place on March 1st from 5 to 7 p.m. That's always a very fun night. Also, the UU Princeton Rainbow Ministry invites you to a discussion of the most banned book in the United States. The book is Genderqueer, a memoir. It recounts the author Maya Kobabe's journey from adolescence to adulthood and the exploration of gender identity and sexuality. That is being held up right there by Alyssa. That is today. It's right after worship today, January 19th from noon to 1:30 in Foz Theater. Books are available in Robinson Lounge after the service if you'd like to purchase one. Everyone also, please note that if you're on our e-list, you received an email message from our Immigrant and Sanctuary Ministry urging you to contact New Jersey legislators regarding the Immigrant Trust Act to protect our immigrant neighbors. You can visit the Unitarian Universalist Faith Action display today in Robinson Lounge after the service to pick up more information about that critical piece of New Jersey legislation. And lastly, the UU Princeton Zen Sangha meets at 11:45 in Foz Theater next Sunday. Practice consists of chanting the Heart Sutra and 25 minutes of silent meditation, followed by a Dharma talk and discussion. Everybody is welcome to that, whether you're familiar with the practice or not. In fact, if you're not and you'd like an introduction, that's a great way to get one. That's next Sunday at 11:45 in Foz Theater. And now, grateful for each and welcoming all, let us be together for a time of peace and balance in this space of community and acceptance, for a sacred hour in which we can remember the good, seek the true, and look together toward that love that holds all of us. Come, let us worship together.
Love is not this sentimental something that we talk about. It's not merely an emotional something. Love is creative, understanding goodwill for all men. It is a refusal to defeat any individual. When you rise to the level of love, of its great beauty and power, you seek only to defeat evil systems. Individuals who happen to be caught up in that system, you love, but you seek to defeat the system. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Let us join together in the spirit of prayer. Holy One, we ask you to remind us that we are of creation, not above it, in the world, not beyond it, alive of grace, not our will. Would you dirty our feet with earth and shower us with rain, warm us with sun, chill us with wind, startle us with lightning, shake us with thunder, and soothe us with stars? Would you take us outside and pause our paces, bring our faces toward sky, toward ground, toward treetop, toward root, toward rock, toward cloud, toward pond, toward puddle, toward wave, toward ripple, toward ice, toward snow, toward deer and rabbit and soaring bird? Would you pause us in beauty and peace and let us know our place in that presence and let us feel the grace of that awareness? Would you, Holy One, help us know ourselves as one with you and with each other and with all of this which is indeed good and always good. And here in the silence, we offer these, the prayers and meditations of our hearts. May it be so, and amen. Our first reading this morning is from King's sermon, Shattered Dreams, which is collected in the book Strength to Love, which includes 15 of his most important sermons. This sermon talks about how to deal with dashed hopes and disappointments and fears that one experiences in life in general, but in movements for justice and freedom in particular. He says that you can become bitter and resentful, or you can withdraw and try to escape, or you can become fatalistic. And then he writes, and the reading begins here. What then is the answer? The answer lies in our willing acceptance of unwanted and unfortunate circumstances, even as we cling to a radiant hope, our acceptance of finite disappointment, even as we adhere to infinite hope. This is not the grim, bitter acceptance of the fatalist, but the achievement found in Jeremiah's words, "This is a grief, and I must bear it." You must honestly confront your shattered dreams. And our second reading is from Praise Song for the Day by the poet Elizabeth Alexander. She wrote this for and delivered this at President Obama's first inauguration. This is just part of it. Each day we go about our business, walking past each other, catching each other's eyes or not, about to speak or speaking. All about us is noise. All about us is noise and bramble, thorn and din, each one of our ancestors on our tongues. Someone is stitching up a hem, darning a hole in a uniform, patching a tire, repairing the things in need of repair. Someone is trying to make music somewhere with a pair of wooden spoons on an oil drum with cello, boombox, harmonica, voice. A woman and her son wait for the bus. A farmer considers the changing sky. A teacher says, "Take out your pencils, begin." We encounter each other in words spiny or smooth, whispered or declaimed, words to consider, reconsider. We cross dirt roads and highways that mark the will of someone and then others who said, "I need to see what's on the other side. I know there's something better down the road. We need to find a place where we are safe. We walk into that which we cannot yet see."
Good morning. Martin Luther King Jr. was a hero from my childhood. My mom was a civil rights activist on Long Island, and I've told this story here before of how I watched the evening news with my dad when I was 5 years old, searching for my mom's face at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where Dr. King gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. I've tried over the years to borrow a little of my mother's strength, her belief that injustice should never be met with a shrug of the shoulders, her conviction that people are basically good, and her faith that change is possible. In the decades since the 1960s, I've learned more about how racism is baked into our society and confronted my own beliefs. I'm still learning. It's a journey that started here in a beloved Conversations course and has continued. And quite frankly, once you see it, you can't unsee it. I am searching for some faith this year, when Martin Luther King Jr. Day coincides with a certain other event in Washington, D.C., that makes many of us fear we are entering a dark time in our country and in the world. On Monday night, I'm singing with a multi-faith choir at Martin Luther King Jr. Day service at the First Baptist Church. I invite you to come. It's an interfaith service, and Reverend Bill will be there too. I mention this because this is a different kind of singing for me, one in which we sometimes don't have the music and we have to learn the tune on the fly. And I think of finding faith right now as something like that. We don't have the music, and we know we have to sing anyway. I find it helpful right now to remember the faith of Dr. King himself. And while some of us, myself included, might not share Dr. King's belief in God and heaven and Christianity in general, we do share his belief in the beloved community. It is a core tenet of our religion, the idea of building a world based on love and justice. We need to hold on to that idea of the beloved community, now more than ever. If Dr. King could retain his faith in the face of being stabbed, arrested, hounded by the FBI, and threatened, maybe we can too. Dr. King told us how to deal with people who are filled with hate. In keeping with his deep-rooted philosophy of nonviolence, he told us to meet hate with love. Somebody must have sense enough and morality enough to cut off the chain of hate and the chain of evil in the universe, he said. and you do that by love. Dr. King also made abundantly clear that the love he was speaking of wasn't what he called emotional bosh. It was active. It required action. It was a force to be reckoned with. He directed this message to white liberals who espoused equal rights for Black people, but didn't act on those beliefs. Love that does not satisfy justice, he said, is no love at all. And in all this, Dr. King knew that none of this, the building the beloved community, the road to justice, would be easy. In what seems like the most apt description of this moment, Dr. King said, there will be those moments when the buoyancy of hope will be transformed into the fatigue of despair. Our dreams will sometimes be shattered and our ethereal hopes blasted. But he again found the solution in faith. Difficult and painful as it is, he said, we must walk on in the days ahead with an audacious faith in the future. I'll confess that audacious faith in the future is a tall order right now. I'm not here before you to ask all of you to find strength so much as I am trying to find it in myself. But for me, the road forward is to put my faith in Dr. King and our UU idea of the beloved community, just enough to hang on by my fingernails. And I urge you to try to do the same.
My earliest memory of Martin Luther King Jr. involves a bulletin board in grade school. I was in third grade and my teacher was helping us celebrate his birthday. She stapled construction paper and cut out letters to the corkboard to tell some of his story. And as always, when she changed the bulletin board, she spent a few minutes explaining to us what she was doing. She included a few excerpts of the I Have a Dream speech, and I remember being particularly caught up in his words that imagined a future when the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I didn't know that that didn't already really happen when he said those words, and so the teacher explained it to all of us, as well as the other ways in which King and the civil rights movement fueled progress toward equality. Another clear memory of Martin Luther King Jr. happened in seventh grade when I was getting ready for school one morning and heard that specific portion of the I Have a Dream speech on the morning news. It must have been around MLK Day, and they showed most of the last part of the speech, his passionate dream repetitions and his repeated proclamations to let freedom ring from so many different places. I was mesmerized by the speech. When it was over, I wanted it to go on, and so I switched channels to try and find it again. I went to the school library that day during lunch and found a copy of the speech in a book of famous speeches in America, and I photocopied it and stuck it on my bedroom wall. It stayed there for a long time, sharing space with Pittsburgh Steelers posters and WWF posters. That speech, reading it repeatedly, adorning my bedroom wall with it, it likely had a greater impact on me than anything else I read as a kid. And that was really the beginning of a lifetime of deep respect and admiration for that great man. To be sure, he was one among many, and many others contributed as robustly and at great cost to right America's wrong of racism. He was given a platform because he was so good at using it, but others too were equally good and dedicated in their own ways. Many were quieter. Many were women facing down sexism as well as racism. Many couldn't be as public in their activism for fear of losing an income, a home, their lives. His rise was due to the work and dedication of countless people who pulled in the same direction that he did, even if everyone pulled in their own unique way. And yet his unique leadership awakened the moral imagination of a complacent nation. It got people up and interested. It connected them with others whose passion for justice was also becoming more fully alive. He spoke of nonviolence and his supporters grew. He spoke of loving your enemy and his supporters grew. He spoke of future generations living better lives because of the choices we make today, and his supporters grew. His detractors and haters grew as well. From the far right and the far left, they grew in hatred. And from the moderate middle, they grew in often academic and often religiously led debates about pace and message creep and tactics. Many a moderate has tried to slow the prophet by arguing pace and message creep and tactics. Each sought to slow or stop the progress he helmed, and indeed, they did stop some and slow much, but the march went on. The marches went on. More importantly, concrete political goals were articulated and strategized toward reaching. The changes sought were clear and distinct. It was voting, housing, education, transportation, less rallies for radical but vague change and more specific demands for specific redresses. The remedy wasn't agreement with a cause, but support for a bill, a law, real change, not rhetoric. And disappointment was part of all of this movement, as he addresses in the sermon that we read from earlier. He's talking about the shattered dreams of wishing and working for a better world only to be defeated in some way. Maybe in the street, in the store, in the business, at the ballot box. Defeats and setbacks are part of life and the work for justice. And he warns against three responses to the setbacks: becoming bitter and resentful, withdrawing and trying to escape, and becoming fatalistic. Becoming resentful sickens the self, but usually has little to no impact on the object of our resentment. As the saying goes, holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and hoping someone else dies. Bitterness might annoy someone else, but it really only sickens the embittered. And withdrawing and escaping creates this moral dilemma that wears away at your soul. For we know there is work to do and progress to forge through faithful engagement, and yet we refuse because we still grieve this loss and we bury that. It's okay to grieve a loss, but that grief, in King's words, should be transformed from a liability into an asset. The grief should prompt growth and further engagement, which is the opposite of withdrawal. The shattered dream is real and should be known, but it should be taped back together or replaced with a new dream that builds the grief into it. Otherwise, we withdraw into selfishness and fear and a kind of moral malaise that ends up weighing us down. And becoming fatalistic for him means that we just accept what happens because it was preordained to be. It's fate, the fault of external forces, and we can try to understand them, but ultimately we are passive before them. Freedom is a myth, as is choice, as is human agency. Though we may have a little impact here or there, we have no large impact anywhere. This rejection of freedom and agency stifles the mind, the spirit, and this creative energy flowing through movements of people working toward the same goal. It's also ahistorical in any real sense of how changes have happened and at what cost over the years. People clearly have agency, and to think freedom is a myth is usually an elite privilege of people who have quite a bit of it to begin with. Meanwhile, people group themselves freely and work with agency toward creating a better world, and they often succeed in that. And he concludes that the answer to shattered dreams is none of those three options, but to hold on to what he calls a radiant hope, an infinite hope that folds in this grief. The hope makes a mosaic of the shattered dream that brings people together and keeps them moving forward. This radiant hope is a wise and worldly hope. It is mature. It has known setbacks and suffering. It has known death. And yet it also sees on the horizon the future of which we dream and of which our children deserve. And it sees specific moves to make that horizon come a little closer. King's hope is never a childish hope, a naive hope, a hope in which the day is always sunny and the traffic always clear. It's a hope that has seen church children buried by hatred and violence, a hope that has faced threats to his life and his family's life, a hope cultivated in the dark nights of the soul when the shattered dreams lay atop one another as though they are a mountain of glass and despair. It's a stone of hope being hewn from that mountain of despair, as King phrased it, a stone of this world and all its struggles that nonetheless knows that the future is not foretold, that we make it, and that knows that withdrawal is immoral and bitterness deadly, and moreover, that progress moves in fits and starts, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, and sometimes it backtracks. But that must only determine our strategy. It must only clarify the stakes. It must lead us to reach out and build broader coalitions, working in new ways with new people, but never lead us to resentment, to withdrawal, or to the abandonment of our dreams. Instead, we must turn the grief into hope and turn the loss into a strategy and turn the liability into an asset, again, as he says in his sermon. His radiant, infinite hope, as he described it, then makes a human, holy, and moral case for fighting the continued ills of racism and economic exploitation and war. Those were the three evils he identified in his day. He might add to them today. We definitely can. As a new administration begins tomorrow, we know that those ills that he identified then, as well as ills of xenophobia and transphobia, environmental devastation, and a turning away from mutual concern and care for those who are struggling, will be the callings of these days. As was the case for him, the work for us is momentous and will be difficult, and some shattering has already happened and more will. But his radiant hope, his infinite hope in the face of finite disappointments can lead us away from that resentment and detachment and abandonment and toward the continued building of the beloved community. The shattered dreams of which he spoke are the same shattered dreams for many today, and our best response remains the one that he prophetically laid out. Practice hope and build anew. Practice hope and reach out. Practice hope and get to work. This is what will build a nation of more peace, more plenty, and more love. This was his dream then and remains ours to enliven anew now. The writer Charles Wilson described this love, this agape love at the center of King's ministry, as a teleological love, or a love that is inseparably linked to the destiny of humankind. A teleological love would be a love so deep and ever-present that it never separates from one's life and experiences. A teleological love over times corrects division, counters hatred, and creates a healing tension between unloving acts and loving core of existence. It's a whole and holy love that can propel one through hard, difficult, and trying days, because those days can be built in something better to come. It doesn't stop things from shattering, but it takes the shards and makes of them something beautiful and something powerful. King included this sentiment in that same sermon, writing of his forebears who were enslaved. They clung tenaciously to the hope of freedom. In a seemingly hopeless situation, they fashioned within their souls a creative optimism that strengthened them. Their bottomless vitality transformed the darkness of frustration into the light of hope. And so too must we, on the eve of an administration that threatens only backtracking in the journey toward the beloved community, hold on to that same hope, live for each other, and love the stranger. So too must we stand tall with shoulders square and proclaim the truth and power of love. So too must we move beyond rhetoric and toward strategy, agreeing on goals and never giving up until they're reached and then creating new goals. So too must we love our enemy, lest we become consumed and our spirits deadened by hate. So too must we practice peace, for it is the only way to win hearts and not harm innocence. And so too must we expect the grief, the shattering, the disappointment, and then enfold them into a more resounding call for love and justice that can guide us. So too must we cling to hope, a radiant, infinite hope that fuels our actions, that brings us together, and that can increase our numbers one by one until all are pulling together, and all are beloved, and all are loving. May it be so, and amen. At the end of our hour, we extinguish our chalice, knowing that its light carries us until we gather again. Go forth grateful for the moments before you, the breath within you, the people among you, and the Spirit guiding you toward lives of love and kindness. And go forth knowing that you are held always and always with everyone else by that great love of no beginning and never ending. Go in peace, and amen.